Welcome to Business Beyond the Mic, where we join Carli Van Heerden, CEO and founder of We Edit Podcasts. Together, let's uncover the art of podcasting.
Hey everyone, and welcome to Business Beyond the Mic. I'm your host, Carli Van Heerden. Today on the show, we're back with another edition of the Founders Corner series. Now, these episodes are based on previous segments of our weekly newsletter over at We Edit Podcasts. So if you're looking for this type of content first, check out the link in our show notes. Now, in this episode, we're diving into the podcast growth strategy that every podcaster needs. Now, what exactly is that? Well, enter the flywheel. Now, don't worry, in this episode, I break down exactly what a flywheel is. I also share and outline the quick reference one that I use, and I share 3 key components that every podcaster needs to create their own successful content flywheel. This is a jam-packed episode, so let's get into it. Hello and welcome to the 3rd edition of the Founders Corner. Today we're diving straight into the podcast growth strategy that every podcaster needs. Now, in the last while, I've heard a lot about the value that lies in being able to create a continuous loop of content. Whether you are a creator like a podcaster, blogger, writer, course builder, brand builder, you name it, everything relies on you being able to consistently put out a high value of content for your audience. Now, each of those individuals always seem to pull back to the same pain point. How can I create more content? Where can I find ideas for my next piece of great content? How can I fill up my idea bank or my content bank? What can I do next that will resonate with my audience? Well, that is where a content flywheel comes into play. The flywheel was invented by James Watt, specifically as an energy efficient tool. Now, when you think about the flywheel, when it's not in motion, it takes a lot of energy to get it moving. The friction that it's created starts out to be very difficult to move. And you can say the same thing when it comes to creating content. When you've hit that writer's block, or you just don't have any inspiration, or there's nothing specifically that you know to answer for your audience, then it's hard to get that content flywheel per se to move, to get into that loop that you want to create. However, once it gets moving, it requires less and less energy to get that motion going. And that's exactly where you want to be, in that continuous generation of content. Now, when your business relies on content generation, then it is crucial to have this flywheel to combat any of that lack of inspiration or, emptying that content bag. And the same can be said for your podcast. If you want to be successful, you have to be able to get into that loop there and make it work for you. And in the beginning, it takes significant effort to see that needle move. And it requires so much more for you to be able to put in all that hard work without necessarily seeing the results right away. So then what should you rely on in these early stages? Now that all comes down to consistency. The more high value content you commit to putting out, the more you will build on the momentum and you will start to benefit from this compounding effect, and it'll actually push you into that success loop. So let's look at what does a quick reference content flywheel look like, and something that you can use in your everyday podcasting routine. Now, it's based on 4 principal pillars. It all starts with creating high quality content and then doing it at a consistent basis. And then you create shareable content from what you create and break it down, atomize it into repurposing content on social media, marketing your episodes. And then it leads to more listeners, new listeners, which then again inspire new high value content. Now, of course, within each of these pillars, there is significant room to expand, and you can create vast content flywheels with a lot of details to help you really flesh out exactly how you want to create this loop and where setting your goals in each of these pillars to make sure that you are finding success. But what I want to touch on today is just the significant power that comes from building this content flywheel. Within each rotation, you build in momentum and it reduces the friction that helps you get to the next pillar so much faster the next time. So instead of having to add all this force every single time, each of the stages builds its own momentum, propelling you forward into the loop. Now, to understand what you have to build into your content flywheel, you first have to understand what it is that you want to achieve from it. So is it more downloads? Is it a bigger audience? Is it greater reach, more discoverabilities? What are your goals and what do you want to achieve for your podcast growth? So to help you in this process of creating your very own content flywheel for your podcast, let's look at 3 key components. So the very first thing is to build in consistency and encourage it. Now, I know consistency gets absolutely beat over the head, but you know what? It's because it works. You won't be able to make any impact with your podcast if you aren't consistently publishing week in, week out for many, many months or years to come. Or you won't be able to build that audience if you aren't consistently reaching out to your listeners, building that community around your podcast and really fostering it to grow. Same thing rings true for being able to market your podcast and become more discoverable. If you aren't doing what you can to promote your podcast in different groups, to your listeners, to your family, to your friends, encouraging reviews, everything that you can do to help it grow consistently, then of course you aren't going to make any impact. So the same thing rings true for your content flywheel. Of course, that first step is consistently publishing, right? So if you build that into your flywheel, that you know that you're going to keep building momentum with each turn and help you just create more content more easily as you go along this journey. The second thing is to build in feedback. So what better way to get feedback than from your listeners? And you know what? Putting that in the center of your flywheel. Yes, that's right. Put them smack dab in the middle of your content flywheel to make sure that whatever you are doing to build momentum, it's coming in alignment with what your listeners are asking from you. From there, every piece of content that you design and create should be to solve a problem that your listeners are looking to answer, or answering the questions that are on their hearts, or finding ways to just align and resonate with what they are looking for when it comes to your specific podcast. And in this way, your listeners aren't just taking a more active role in what content you're putting out, but they're also getting to benefit directly from this feedback loop, because if they give you the feedback and it's built into your content loop, the content that you're creating is going to exactly answer the questions that they have. So think about it this way. Quality content with a built-in feedback mechanism leads to new ideas and essentially the creation of content that is even more aligned with your audience and your listeners. And finally, the third is to start to capitalize on the momentum, especially the momentum that together with your audience you've created. Because the more valuable your content becomes to your listeners, the more awareness you will build around your podcast. And this is really where this podcast growth strategy shows its value. And at this stage, your content consumers or listeners are essentially going to become your content promoters as well, because what you're sharing is answering their questions, and then they will more likely share this out. And this is exactly where you want to be. So it's time to get that wheel turning. Now, what's the biggest takeaway from today? You can use this podcast growth strategy to simply grow your show. Now, it might not be easy because it does require initial hard work and consistency, but it is simple. It's easy to break down and put into action today. So don't let the momentum of this incredible content flywheel that you've created go to waste. Put it into action, make it work for you, and essentially work smarter and not harder. Thanks everyone for tuning in, and we will see you next time.